Good morning, my name is Alessandro Carmona and I work for the Research Center for Energy Resources and Consumption. We'll be reviewing the production of biogas from two major perspectives. First, current technologies at small scale, focus on rural areas and current industrial examples. By which technology can biogas be produced? The anaerobic digestion is a process of organic material degradation by microorganisms under anaerobic conditions. This means that this is a process without light and under oxygen-depleted conditions through four steps: hydrolysis, acidification, acetic acid production, and methane production. This slide shows greenhouse gas emissions per ton of bio-waste subjected to different treatments together with the emissions for the average treatment mix in the European Union in 2008. Home composting and anaerobic digestion have small net emission savings. Incineration also performs well because the emitted carbon dioxide is of biogenic origin and thus considered not to contribute to global warming. Direct emissions from home composting are negligible if composting is well done and there is no transport involved. The average emissions from municipal biowaste treatment in the European Union are largely influenced by the significant use of landfill in many countries. A shift to recycling or recovery options for biowaste would thus yield important climate benefits. In 2008, around 44 million tons of municipal solid waste were composted. This led to emissions of 1.4 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Treating all this waste by anaerobic digestion instead would reduce the net emissions to minus 2 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The anaerobic digestion is a process by which organic waste materials are broken down by naturally occurring bacteria in the absence of oxygen. Organic waste is the technical term of plant and animal material, for example, food waste, cow manure, energy crops, sewage, among others. While anaerobic digestion occurs naturally, it can also be facilitated in a controlled environment, like a biogas production facility. The anaerobic digestion process results in three products: biogas, typically between 50 to 70% methane. After impurities have been filtered, the biogas can be burned in a cogeneration of heat and power unit to generate electricity. Second product, digestate, a high-quality soil fertilizer rich in nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium. 3. Heat generated from the combustion of the methane gas that can be captured and put to use as either steam or hot water. Differences between agricultural residues and other types of feedstock for the anaerobic digestion process. The anaerobic digestion technology is able to valorize all kinds of organic feedstock. In the graph, a distribution of biomethane plants currently running in Europe is presented. With the highest percentage, we can find the energy crops, which constitute significant potential for meeting the future energy need worldwide. Although controversial, agricultural lands offer an alternative to the agriculture, which is referred to as energy farming. For biogas production, biomass feedstock can be a concentrated and diluted liquid, solid, or slurries. It includes animal byproducts such as manure, agricultural byproducts such as straw, biowaste from households, industrial and commercial waste from markets and restaurants, sewage sludge from wastewater treatment plants, among others. Good biomass has a high content of lignin and it is not suitable for anaerobic digestion. As shown in this slide, different feedstocks have different biogas yields and cause different methane contents. The total cost of biogas production from anaerobic digestion depends mainly on the prices of feedstocks and the plant capacity. In general, both capital and operation costs decrease significantly with the plant scale, while consumption-related costs, especially for feedstock supply, only decrease slightly with larger plant capacities. Operation-related costs include, above all, costs for maintenance and repair, as well as labor costs. When energy crops are used for biogas production, operational costs are typically a little higher compared to biogas production from agricultural and industrial waste due to the handling of the feedstock at the plant. Consumption-related costs can be divided into costs for feedstock supply and auxiliary energy that is needed for operating the biogas plant. The costs for feedstock can be very different. Some waste product may be available free of charge, or biogas plant operators might even receive money for waste treatment. Pretreatment technologies: physical, chemical, and biological pretreatments. As mentioned before, the anaerobic digestion process can be divided into several phases that occur simultaneously. For methane to be the end product of the process, the organic matter within the feedstock has to be properly decomposed in each phase. However, some feedstocks with a high content of lignin are difficult to degrade. Biomass pretreatment prior to anaerobic digestion is usually required to reduce structural and compositional impediments of lignocellulosic biomass and expose the polymeric chains of cellulose and hemicellulose to microbial breakdown, so as to increase the rate of biomass degradation and biogas yield. The effects of different pretreatment techniques on the chemical composition and physical characteristics of lignocellulosic biomass are summarized in this table. In general, different pretreatment methods have a major effect on the accessible area of lignocellulosic biomass. In the scheme at the bottom left, we see a study using scanning electron microscopy for a dynamic observation of the biodegradability of biomass with a high content of lignin treated with anaerobic digestion. The need to use feedstocks that are more difficult to handle, displaying either too low or too high biodegradation rates, is calling for the development of adapted pretreatments. On the other side, biological pretreatments are very promising due to their reasonable cost, environmental friendliness, and possible application to a wide spectrum of feedstocks. They can be divided into three categories: enzymatic, anaerobic, and aerobic ones. This table gathers the effect of each biological pretreatment on methane yield as a function of the feedstock. Enzymatic pretreatments can be interesting in the case of agricultural waste, municipal solid waste, landfill, and sludge. Agricultural wastes already have full-scale commercialized enzymatic cocktails displaying positive effects on methane yields. Application of these cocktails in the landfill lixiviate recirculation system is another promising topic, still at research scale. Logistics: cost, distance for transportation of biomass, and investment schedule. In the slide, we see an example of the use of anaerobic digestion in Poland in an agricultural scheme. Each agricultural plant includes a set of facilities and installation for the production and storage of biogas. The following elements can be distinguished here: a reception and sorting area, a sanitation unit, a preparing substrate, pit, a digestive chamber or chambers, a cogeneration of heat and power installation, a pump station, among others. The type and amount of substrate and the conditions of the process are determined already at the stage of designing a biogas plant. This is important in terms of technical aspects, including the size and type of the digester chamber. It is assumed that a digester chamber with a volume of approximately 50 to 150 cubic meters is suitable for small agricultural holdings. Larger sets are also used in agriculture. For example, in the case of processing of up to 10,000 cubic meters of feedstock per year, the digester chamber has a volume up to 1,000 cubic meters, contains 2 or more mixers, and has a roof with a double membrane that forms the gas tank. The production of biogas and energy is presented in Table 1. Mainly plant species with a high biomass productivity per unit are suitable for cultivation for energy purposes. The investment process of an agricultural biogas plant in this example of Poland is shown in this Gantt chart. The time needed to prepare the project documentation, To obtain decisions and permits and to finalize the contract was about 2 years. Another year is needed for the project implementation as well as biogas plant startup. The construction and operation of agricultural biogas plants should not result in a negative influence on the natural environment. Therefore, by means of consultation with local communities, a report to assess a biogas plant impact on the natural environment is prepared. Regarding the benefits of integrating the anaerobic digestion process within an agriculture scheme, we can identify the following. Through anaerobic digestion of plant biomass and manures, the form of nitrogen is transformed, thereby influencing fertilization regimes and nitrogen dynamics of the farm system in general. Other benefits of integrating anaerobic digestion in this scheme can be seen on crop yield, product quality and rotations, management of weeds, plant health and soil fertility. Storage of biomass for anaerobic digestion. Some feedstocks are seasonally produced, leading to storage requirements. Ensealing provides a biochemical method using bacterial fermentation to prevent further degradation. After filling and closing the silo, an anaerobic phase begins, where biomass respiration occurs during several hours until all oxygen is removed, consuming sugars and producing carbon dioxide and water. Once oxygen has been depleted, the microorganisms capable of anaerobic growth, for instance lactic acid, bacteria, enterobacteria, clostridia, and yeast, begin to proliferate and compete for the available organic matter. During the stabilization phase, the anaerobic conditions are maintained with a decreasing fermentative activity. The pH remains stable, wherein minimal enzymatic and microbial activity will occur until the silo is opened again. After opening the silo for biodigester feeding, aerobic microorganisms are reactivated, which may lead to energy losses. Thus, the feed-out should be quickly carried out. Technologies for biogas upgrading. Besides the high content of methane and carbon dioxide in biogas, the rest of its composition highly differs depending on the feedstock and operational parameters during the anaerobic digestion process. The gas composition is mainly determined by the type and quality of the biomass, as well as the conditions of the gas generation process. Biogas contains mainly methane and carbon dioxide, but it also contains trace compounds such as hydrogen sulfide, halogenated compounds, and volatile methyl siloxanes. Biogas needs to be upgraded and cleaned before being injected into the natural gas grid or used as a vehicle fuel or in the manufacturing of high-value products. Concentrations of siloxanes in biogas are increasing in the recent years due to the use of silicon-containing compounds in personal care products and silicone oils. The photograph A shows the damage caused by siloxane-containing gas on engines. B presents silica deposits on spark plugs. C exhibits the damage caused by combustion of siloxane-rich biogas in microturbines. And finally, in D, we can see the silica deposits in domestic boilers. There are different upgrading technologies to separate carbon dioxide and other trace compounds from biogas. Carbon dioxide removal via water scrubbing is a classical unit operation in chemical engineering, based on the higher aqueous solubility of carbon dioxide compared to that of methane. Organic solvent scrubbing is similar to water scrubbing, uses polyethylene glycol-based absorbents which exhibit a higher affinity for CO2 and H2S. Pressure swing absorption is based on the selective absorption of carbon dioxide over methane onto porous adsorbents with a high specific surface area such as activated carbon. Conventional membranes for biogas upgrading retain methane and nitrogen and facilitate the preferential permeation of oxygen, water, carbon dioxide, and H2S. But photosynthetic biogas upgrading relies on the ability of microalgae to convert CO2 into biomass that can be further valorized. An example of biogas upgrading is the biogas plant shown in the slide, located in Austria, which was put in operation in 2004. The biogas also produces electricity, which is distributed by national and regional energy providers to private households or companies. In addition to the production of heat and electricity by a combined heat and power plant, biogas is upgraded to biomethane by membrane technology. Electricity is fed into the grid, heat into the district heating network, and the biomethane into the national gas grid. This kind of upgrading plant is the first in Austria and is the first membrane upgrading plant of its kind worldwide. A second example of industrial biogas upgrading is the European project Urbiofilm for biogas bioconversion to biomethane and added value products. The goal is to optimize the microalgae bacterial process and biopolymers production. The project is also focused on validating the process as a cost-effective, environmentally friendly technology able to completely remove hydrogen sulfide from biogas. Upgrading to biomethane is necessary when using biogas as a vehicle fuel. During this step, electricity and heat are consumed, and a little methane is lost with the off gas. The table shows the energy and heat demands and methane losses during different upgrading technologies. According to the available information, the most electricity demanding upgrading technology is the physical scrubber. On the other hand, although all the upgrading technologies show negligible methane losses, the one with the highest losses is the separation by membranes. Now I will mention a few examples of good practices for efficient use of heat from biogas plants. In 2004, 15 farmers decided to create a cooperative and set up a biogas plant producing electricity and heat locally. The plant is operated with pig manure and energy crops grown on the land of cooperative members. About 10,000 tons of energy crops are used in the biogas plant annually. The electrical output of the plant is 500 kilowatt electricity, and it provides heat to 120 houses. This is the first biogas plant with a significant heat supply in the Czech Republic. The input substrates are pig slurry and energy crops. The special design feature of the plant is a small cogeneration unit to cover the electricity and heat for self-consumption. The majority of produced biogas is transported by a long biogas pipeline to the nearby town, where a new biogas cogeneration heat and power plant supplies heat to a spa center and to a residential building. This is the first shrimp farm in Germany and utilizes a part of waste heat produced by the biogas plant for the shrimp breeding facility. This facility shows a good carbon dioxide balance as the shrimps are locally bred. The production emits 40% less carbon dioxide compared with imported ones. The biogas plant is operated since 2006 with 500 kilowatt electricity installed capacity. It has one digester and uses over 7,000 tons of energy crops as substrate per year. In addition, the biogas plant supplies its heat to 7 apartments and a small private swimming pool. Since 2005, this farm is running a biogas plant with an installed capacity of 800 kilowatt electricity. The farm has a drying plant next to the biogas plant, complemented by a removal system for the nitrogen contained in the digestate. The drying plant, exploiting the heat coming from the generator, has two fundamental outputs: organic matter with 90% of dry matter and liquid ammonium sulfate produced by air cleaning through a stripping process. All collected industrial and municipal waste is delivered to the city of Riges landfill, around 400,000 tons per year. In 2002, the landfill gas collection system was built, and in order to get an additional income, it was decided to use collected gas for electricity production. About 30% of the heat is used for providing heating for office building and an infiltrate reactor unit. The heat produced by the biogas is used for a new greenhouse complex with an area of around 4,000 square meters. In 2002, this municipality in the Netherlands began to develop a new residential area in which there are 3,000 houses, a church, schools, and 15,000 square meters of offices and shops. The municipality chose a system with farm waste co-digestion and associated cogeneration of heat and power. The biogas plant consists of 2 digesters and 1 post-digester with a capacity for treating 30,000 cubic meters of manure and organic material per year. Approximately 25% of the biogas generated is used in heating the digester, the farm, and farmhouses. Now we will briefly review some novel added value products from biogas besides heat and power. Methane bioconversion into microbial molecules with a high retail value in the industry offers a potential cost-efficient and environmentally friendly technological alternative within the context of the circular economy. A methane-based biorefinery offers the production of different compounds such as ectoine, feed proteins, biofuels, bioplastics, and polysaccharides. Current biotechnological processes could be the best solution for methane valorization due to their cost-effectiveness and their low environmental impact. The implementation of bioreactors for methane treatment is still under research. This limitation is mainly based on the low water solubility of methane, which complicates its mass transfer to the microbial community and increases the cost of methane conversion biotechnologies. One promising example is the production of high added value molecule ectoine. This molecule is an amino acid that was for the first time described in a microbial culture in 1985. It is produced by microorganisms as a protective strategy to the saline conditions in their environment. Ectoine, with a market value of €1,000 per kilogram, is currently used in the cosmetic industry. It is obtained through the growth of a microbial culture of pure bacteria exposed to saline conditions, fed with the expensive substrate glucose. The possibility of obtaining ectoine from a waste such as methane contained in biogas expands the applications of the anaerobic digestion process, not only as a method to treat organic waste, but also as a technology to obtain added value products. The example of the production of the added value molecule ectoine from biogas is the European project Deep Purple. The bioconversion of biogas into ectoine is conducted at the University of Valladolid in Spain. The project is currently under the development of the technology at a semi-pilot scale with high mass transfer bioreactors of 20 liters. Soon the project will scale up to a bioreactor of 2 cubic meters, converting biomethane into ectoine. A second example of the production of an added value molecule from biogas is methanol as fuel. Global methanol production currently amounts to about 80 million metric tons per year. Grey methanol from natural gas has emissions similar to other fossil fuels such as liquefied natural gas. Green methanol instead may be produced via biological pathways using the biogas produced during anaerobic digestion. Large-scale production of green methanol from biogas could be economically competitive with grey methanol from natural gas when the system is optimized. Drivers: energy demand for digestion production processes and auxiliary facilities. Now we will talk about the energy needs for an anaerobic digestion plant. In this example, the substrates for the conversion process are manure, in liquid and solid form, as well as energy crops. All energy crops are stored in silos for all-year operation. The substrate is premixed in 2 different vertical mixer systems and fed into the digesters via screws. Since all crops are cut during the harvesting process, no additional pretreatment is applied. The biogas plant has 2 digesters covered with insulation concrete and 1 digester set up with a foil inflation dome for gas storage. Every digester is equipped with different heating and mixer systems. The figures shows the energy produced and procured in 2011, calculated for an average day. The mean value of produced electric energy reached around 4,000 kilowatt-hour a day, while the energy consumed by the auxiliary was about 360 kilowatt-hour a day, leading to a total energy demand between 8 to 9%. The path for gas production is the biggest consumer and has a requirement of roughly 200 kilowatt-hour a day, which represents more or less 60% of the total energy demand of the biogas plant. The path for gas utilization reaches around 120 kilowatt-hour a day This is more or less 30% of total energy demand of the biogas plant. A deeper insight in the distribution of the gas utilization path shows that the mixers with 170 kWh day are one of the most demanding consumer equipment in this example, something to take into account when designing a biogas plant. Now we will review a few success cases for the digestion of residues produced on-site. The substrate used in the co-digestion biogas process are the organic fraction of household waste from municipalities, residues from food production companies, and manure. The digestate is distributed to agricultural land, effectively recirculating nutrients such as phosphorus. The purified biogas is used as automotive fuel for buses, waste collection trucks, taxis, and private cars. This plant is located in Sweden, showcases a successful example of food waste digestion with almost 15 years of biogas production from source-separated food waste. Today, 60% of the household food waste is source-separated, which corresponds to 55 kilograms food waste per inhabitant each year. The plant also has a very long experience from injected biomethane into the natural gas grid, which has been in service for over a decade. This biogas plant in Switzerland started operation in 2008. The plant consists of one thermophilic and two mesophilic digesters. The plant receives mainly pig manure from 80 farmers and different kinds of organic waste from the regional food industry, as well as the bio-waste from the municipal solid waste collection service. The solid output is mature under aerobic conditions, whereas the liquid output is treated by ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis to obtain a concentrated liquid fertilizer and clean water. The Kalmari farm is one of the pioneer farms producing biogas in Finland, and an excellent example of innovative use of biogas technology. The farm is self-sufficient in electricity, heat and vehicle fuel. Excess electricity is sold to the grid, and vehicle fuel sales exceeded 1,000 megawatt-hour in 2011. The biogas plant digests co-manure and confectionery byproducts, and in the future will also digest fat trap waste and liquid biowaste. Occasionally, smaller amounts of energy crops are also digested. Digestate is used as a biofertilizer on the farm's own fields. Biogas technology on the Kalmari farm thus efficiently combines energy production, waste treatment, and nutrient recycling. The following slide describes an example for the broadening of raw materials used as feedstock. The Linkogas centralized biogas plant in Denmark was built in 1990 as a manure-based mesophilic anaerobic digestion plant. In 1999, the plant was totally refurbished and switched to thermophilic operation with an additional post-digestion step. The effect of these measures was a doubling of the methane production at the plant. The biogas plant is operated as a cooperative company, owned by 50 local farmers who supply animal slurry to the plant. The aim of the plant is to maintain and operate a manure-based biogas plant that co-digests the animal slurry supplied by its members with other types of feedstock. The biogas plant is intended to assist its members to redistribute their excess slurry in the neighboring area to solve the other problems caused by application of raw slurry as a fertilizer and to help the farmers involved to establish and manage the mandatory slurry storage capacity. I thank you very much for your attention, and I will be glad to answer any of your questions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Manolis Karambenis from Center for Research and Technology in LAS. I will give a short presentation today on the topic of agrobiomass as concerns sustainable and economic rural heating. I would like to thank first of all Power for Bio project and Circe for the invitation to give this presentation. I will start by saying a few things about my organization. CERF, Center for Research and Technology in LAS, is the largest research institute in Greece. It is organized in different institutes covering different research fields. I am coming particularly from the Chemical Process and Energy Resources Institute, which was established in its current form in 2012, but has an even longer history. And our primary focus, as the name implies, are the chemical processes and energy. Among other things, we have a very solid background in solid, liquid, and gaseous biofuels, any type of energetic utilization technologies, biomass value chains, anti-pollution technologies, or even bioeconomy, meaning non-energy applications. We employ about 250 people and an annual turnover of about 10 million euros, mostly coming from competitive projects and industrial services. When it comes to projects, especially as far as biomass and agrobiomass is concerned, we have been involved in numerous over the last years. For example, AgroInlog, Uprunning, Biofit Music, and for Industry. You can find more information by looking into their websites. Today I will be speaking about agrobiomass. I will start by giving a short overview of the potential, the current uses, costs, technologies and emissions of this type of fuel. I will give a few examples of how agrobiomass is used in energy applications. And I will also be speaking about what the agrobioheat project is doing to support agrobiomass deployment in Europe, and finally I will finish with some concluding remarks. Agrobiomass. Agrobiomass, we mean any kind of fuel that is of plant origin, lignocellulosic in origin, and especially I would say fairly dry fractions that can be effectively used through thermochemical conversion processes. Agrobiomass is a very broad term. It can imply many different things, and for the purpose of this discussion we group them in three main categories: agricultural residues, agro-industrial byproducts, and finally perennial energy crops, non-edible ones. Apart from the great variability in origin, agrobiomass can be found on the market if it is exploited in a great range of tradable forms, either whole bales, as chips or hog fuel, pellets or briquettes, or some kind of densified material, or even in some cases as a granular fuels in itself, like is the case with olive stones or rice husk. No matter its origin, the main reason why it is worth speaking about agrobiomass is its huge potential in Europe and of course all over the world. There are several studies that confirm this potential. Here you can see some indicative values from a few of those, and by far the largest potential is from herbaceous agricultural residues, things like straw and maize residues. There is a fairly large potential of agricultural prunings, especially in the southern European countries where there is a large share of permanent crops in the agriculture. And then there are also agro-industrial residues, which are not, I would say, insignificant. Just in Spain, for example, it is estimated that more than 1 million tons of exhausted olive cake is produced every year. And then finally we have the energy crops, the non-edible lignocellulosic energy crops, which currently take up a very small fraction of the utilized agricultural area in Europe. However, in the future, there are several scenarios about the coverage of the energy demand by 2050, which assume that their coverage will increase dramatically to some million hectares. Regardless of the potential, the actual situation of agrobiomass consumption at the moment is not so great or big. It is assumed by Bioenergy Europe, for example, through its calculations, that agrobiomass actually is around 20% of the biomass feedstock used in energy in 2018. The majority is coming from woody biomass and some share of waste biomass fractions as well. If you look, however, on the 2050 potential, agrobiomass has by far the largest potential for increase regardless of the scenario. So in principle, it can contribute substantially to future renewable energy targets. If we move on from the European perspective and then focus on the national one, there are some member state examples where agrobiomass does play a significant role. When it comes to straw, the most well-known example, and I think a world leader in this case, is Denmark. Denmark uses about 2.3% of its gross energy consumption from straw, and around a little over 10% of the total renewable energy production from this resource. Apart from this well-known example, it's a little lesser known fact that many countries like Spain or Italy and Greece in the south, or Eastern European countries like Bulgaria and Ukraine do have a significant production and an extended use of agro-industrial residues. In southern countries, it's mostly fractions related to olive oil production. In eastern countries, mostly related to sunflower oil, so sunflower husk pellets. And often these market shares may be comparable to wood pellets in the same countries. But one other fact which makes agrobiomass very important is that it is a cost-competitive fuel. I give you some indicative values here that have been compiled by Webium and Circe in the framework of the AgrobioHeat project, which explain just how much competitive agrobiomass really is. And if you look at the price of different commodity fuels like natural gas or heating oil, or even biomass fuels like wood pellets, you will see that most of the agrobiomass fuels that appear on the top, they are cheaper when it comes to their price per energy content. There are even in Spain olive stones, which you can find, I would say, as a kind of a commodity fuel, also cheaper than most other commodity fuels available on the market. So this is one of the reasons why it makes sense to start using agrobiomass for example, heating applications. And in principle, you could do that even without any kind of subsidy scheme. The big question, of course, is a techno-economic one, and the fact that if you are willing to use agrobiomass as a fuel, then you would need probably a more expensive boiler, so a larger capex investment. So it's really a question of how much energy or heat energy you would need within the year, and whether this investment would pay off in a reasonable amount of time. Apart from that, there is also the question of how you can bring some of these agrobiomasses at your doorstep, and how you can effectively establish a supply chain. And the situation, as you can imagine, is quite different depending on the resource. So I will explain a bit in more detail what happens in each of the categories I have discussed before. So first, we have the category of agricultural residues, and these are things that are available on the field after the harvesting of a main agricultural product, as is straw, or that are produced as part of agronomic practices, as is the case of prunings. Agricultural residues can be herbaceous or woody, and generally they're available at quite low yields when it comes to tonnage per hectare, with some notable exceptions. For example, if you uproot an orchard, then you can get much higher numbers than that, but that is something that is only happening a few times, or one time actually, during the lifetime of a plantation. The thing with agricultural residues is that for farmers, they are not the main reason why they are producing and cultivating crops, so they have to be managed somehow. One common practice, unfortunately still practiced widely, even though it's mostly banned in Europe, is disposal through open field burning. Alternatively, these materials can be used as soil cover or for mulching, or in some cases there are some markets, mostly local ones, like straw, for example, is used extensively for animal feeding or bedding. In that context, energetic value chains can provide farmers with alternative management solutions, and in some cases they can also provide additional benefits. For example, for prunings, it might be risky to leave them on the field and mulch them, because you might have a risk to face the various phytopathological conditions. In any case, what you need to do is to harvest the biomass first from the field, and that is a very critical step of the value chain, because it affects both the costs and the quality. In many cases, it has been estimated that harvesting may be up to 50% of the agrobiomass costs we deliver at your doorstep. The next category are the agro-industrial residues, and these are byproducts of an agro-industry. A pomace mill, for example, a sunflower oil production unit, nut hulling plants, and so on. For these residues to occur, you don't need any dedicated harvesting. The harvesting takes place at the field because of the main product. So you have them available at a point easily enough. And in many cases, these things are available at relatively low moisture content, and they can be available as either granular fuels or fairly easily upgraded into pellets or briquettes. This means that they can have a quite good energy density, and they can already be used in energy applications in various local markets. In fact, they're mostly traded in local original ones, but sometimes even in international ones, and it's not uncommon to have shipments of olive cake, for example, or sunflower husk pellets from one country to another. The price of this material is affected by various conditions. For example, the quality is affecting. It's more expensive to buy olive stones, for example, than olive cake. It's also affected by seasonal availability and demand. Seasonal availability is connected with the level of the agricultural production. A good olive oil year, for example, might lead to a surplus of olive cake and olive stones, while the demand might be affected, for example, by weather conditions, whether the heating season is severe, as well as by the number of large industrial players that are using these materials. In any case, since you have already an existing market for this, it's the easiest option for deploying a new agrobiomass value chain. You can effectively tap into the existing market. And I also have to mention that for some of these assortments, the higher quality ones, like olive stones and nut shells, there are already some fuel quality certification schemes available. Biomassud is the one in mind, and you can even buy certified material like you would with EN Plus for wood pellets. And then the final category are the lignocellulosic perennial energy crops, and these are things that you cultivate explicitly for a non-food market. So the farmer, in this case, makes a conscious decision to cultivate something that will find its way into an energy application. Obviously, in that case, you would expect quite high yield to make the economics work in your favor. And you can cultivate either herbaceous things like miscanthus or woody ones like willow, poplar, and other short rotation coppices. Obviously, again, you need a harvesting step to bring the material from the field to the energy unit, and you might need some dedicated equipment for that. It's not, for example, so easy to harvest short rotation copies compared to miscanthus, where you could use balers that are adapted from straw. Beyond the energetic use, this type of crops can also provide, depending on the context, various other ecosystem services. They can provide, for example, phytoremediation of contaminated soils. They can protect the soil against erosion, or even increase local biodiversity. It really depends on the occasion. But now, after you have harvested the material and you have successfully transported and stored it, you would need to upgraded energetically. And here I will be speaking briefly about the main technology that is used in energy applications, and that in fact thermochemical process or simply combustion. When it comes to agrobiomass, I would say that the state-of-the-art technology is based on the moving rate furnace. You can see an example on the picture on the top. It essentially comprises of a fuel feeding system that might be adapted to deal with any peculiarities of agrobiomass, for example, larger or irregular particle size. You have the moving rate itself and the furnace. You have a system of heat exchangers where the heat transfer between the hot flue gas and the heating medium, which can be water or in some cases even steam, takes place. You have finally the exhaust into the chimney, and you also have the system for the ash extraction, compaction, and so on, which can be automated to a certain extent. Now, with agrobiomass, always it is the case that some kind of manual intervention is unavoidable because of the nature of the fuel. You have ash, for example, and that would need some cleaning from time to time. However, notwithstanding this, the state of the art now is that you can reach a very good level of automation with this type of systems, and there are cases where companies can provide some applications from where you can control and monitor the process remotely, and that can limit the amount of human resources you would need for the operation of such a plant. On the other hand, there is also the issue of how you can control emissions from such a facility, and I would say the state of the art there is the use of either electrostatic precipitators, ESPs, or bulk filters which can control particle emissions. And when it comes to other types of pollutants, there are other things that you might be interested in employing, for example, lime injection for control of sulfur emissions, or systems like selective non-catalytic reduction for the control of NOx emissions. I will now speak also about the emissions from agrobiomass, because the question of how biomass fits into an ever-tightening air quality context is very important in the policy discussions. At the moment, I have to say that for facilities smaller than 1 megawatt, there are no EU level limits regarding agrobiomass combustion. There is, however, the eco-design regulation which sets limits for woody biomass boilers up to 500 kilowatts. Above 1 megawatt, you have the medium combustion plant directive, or the MCP directive, which covers both woody and agrobiomass fuels. And one of the emissions that is quite critical are the NOx emissions. NOx in biomass combustion is mostly related to the fuel nitrogen content. So the more nitrogen you have in the fuel, the more NOx emissions you are expected to have. You can see here in the gray area, these are the expected nitrogen content of some agrobiomass fuels that we have considered for testing the agrobioheat project. And you can see that there is a trend here, and if you are burning some of them with a quite high nitrogen content, you should expect that the emission limit would be higher than the 200 milligrams per normal cubic meter that is set by the eco-design regulation, and that applies to, I would say, small domestic residential appliances. One critical thing here is that in smaller scale it is very difficult or even impossible to control NOx emissions, while in larger scale you can effectively employ SNCR systems, as I've mentioned before. On the other hand, the particle emissions from agrobiomass are also quite higher compared to woody biomass fuels. This is due to the fact that agrobiomass contains a lot of potassium, sodium, and other volatile metals, which leads to quite high PM1 emissions after combustion. Again, these emission limits, if these PM emissions, if left unattended, can exceed limits set by the eco design regulation or even the MCP directive in principle, but they can be controlled effectively by dust precipitation devices like ESPs and so on. So, having briefly explained what is the current status and the challenges to agrobiomass combustion, I will now move on to discuss some energy applications where agrobiomass can be effectively deployed. So, one case where we find agrobiomass effectively used is district heating. District heating, especially in rural areas. I present you here two examples. One is from Denmark. It's, I would say, a fairly typical example for the Danish case, which uses straw for the district heating demands of several municipalities. This particular case is for the city of, the village actually of Ulbjerg. They installed a new straw-fired boiler in 2016. It was produced by a Danish manufacturer, Rika, and it replaced the existing natural gas-fired boiler. The boiler is highly automated. It is capable of burning straw as well as other biomass fractions such as wood chips, and it is equipped with an ESP for particle reduction. It is calculated that such a system can provide up to 50% savings compared to natural gas price peaks, and the local community was actively involved in the boiler selection process and the continued approval of the project. Another example, this one coming from Spain, it's based on another type of biomass resource, vineyard prunings, and it was established in the municipality of Vilafranca del Penedès, near Barcelona, as part of the Vineyards for Heat project, which facilitated the creation of a new value chain based on vineyard prunings. The project initially started with a new social cooperative enterprise for the pruning collection. A 500 kilowatt hazelnut boiler was used to fuel a small network of municipal buildings. And again, we have very good results in terms of fuel savings achieved, and I think you will hear more about this case in an upcoming webinar by Bio4Bio. Another case where agrobiomass is quite popular for heating applications are the greenhouse sector. Greenhouses have quite high energy demands. They are most often located on the countryside, and sometimes they are in locations where they are inaccessible by natural gas or conventional, I would say, fuel or heat networks. So we have here one case in Romania, the Dalia greenhouse. This was a case where the greenhouse was, even from the start, originally heated with sawdust that was locally available from various companies in the area. However, as sawdust was found in its way more and more into particle board production, there was a need to find alternative biomass resources, and then a new value chain was set up using energy willow as well as wood from pasture clearings. The greenhouse has a 6 biomass boiler system with a 4 megawatt thermal capacity in total. It has a high efficiency and particle controls, and it has been estimated again that fuel savings of about 20% are achieved through the use of agrobiomass. A case coming from my home country, Greece, is the case of Agris, quite large nursery plant greenhouse in northern Greece. The heating cost in that case was up to 13% of the total annual cost, and for that reason the company took the decision to install a series of 8 biomass boilers in 2012. Initially, they were using exhausted olive cake, but since it was a fuel mostly available in southern Greece, and there were also a few smell issues, the company switched to sunflower husk pellets. At the moment, they are important. We have collaborated with them for the testing of other agro pellets, such as those coming from olive tree prunings in the past. And regardless of the case, they are saving about 20 to 30% on the annual fuel costs compared to the heavy fuel oil they used to be burning. So again, it's a clear case of how agrobiomass can improve the competitiveness position of a company. And in fact, you can read more about this case in a dedicated report that has been prepared for DGNR of the European Commission, which I invite you to download. Then there are many other cases on the small scale where you can find agrobiomass effectively used. There is a dedicated deliverable of the AgrobioHeat project where you can find more than 100 cases already identified. Briefly, I will highlight a few of those per country. So in Spain, for example, we have an example of a hotel which is using whole straw bales for its heating. And another example is a secondary school which uses olive stones in a 400 kilowatt boiler, and the fact here is that the olive stones are biomass certified. Again, in both cases, significant fuel cost savings are achieved every year because the operators is using cheaper agrobiomass. In France, there are multiple examples of agrobiomass utilization. I give here just two indicative cases. One is a facility for social and professional integration of adults with disabilities, ESAT ADAP 80. This uses for its heating purposes a dual system of two boilers by Hargassner, and the fuel of choice is miscanthus. You can find numerous cases of miscanthus heating in France. You can find, for example, even abbeys that are heated with miscanthus. And then another example is the Eco2 Wacken district heating plant, which includes, among others, a 2 megawatt boiler by the French manufacturer Comterrar that is using more peculiar fuel, in particular corn cobs, for its heating purposes. And also on the eastern end of Europe, in Ukraine, two other examples. One is a winery, ITC Sabo, that is using again vineyard prunings, but this time in an industrial, a more agro-industrial context. And it has a 1.2 megawatt boiler by Krieger, a Ukrainian manufacturer. And another example, which is quite interesting because it is a shopping mall in Kiev, Academy City. It features two boilers by Volin Kalvis, again a Ukrainian manufacturer, and it uses sunflower husk pellets as a fuel. So this is a very interesting example of how agrobiomass can even find its way into an urban setting. I can also, for completeness sake, name a few points about how you can produce electricity from agrobiomass. It's nothing, I would say, new. It's well-proven technology. Generally, you would need, unlike the heating cases, some kind of subsidy scheme to make it work in that particular case. So here are four examples. On the top left corner you can see fuses. This is based in Puglia in Italy, in the village of Calimera. It's the world's first 1 megawatt power plant using exclusively olive tree prunings as a fuel. There are cases in Spain, for example, which use prunings as a part of the fuel mixture, but this plant was designed from the start to use this particular type of resource. On the bottom left you can see an example coming from Greece. It's a 1 megawatt gasification plant, in that case, that is using root chips coming from the plantation removal of the peach orchards in the area. And on the right side, on the top, you can see Snetterton renewable energy plant. This is based on the UK. It was built according, I would say, to the Danish model of straw utilization. But a critical aspect here was that the funding for this project was facilitated through the existence of long-term supply contracts based on miscanthus. So here's an example of how an energy crop is connected with an agricultural residue, straw, to diversify the fuel supply and bring some security in the fuel sourcing. And on the bottom right, you can see Studstorp power station. Studstorp used to be a coal plant. It was converted to wood pellets fire in 2016. Back in its coal days, Studstorp was co-firing straw. It stopped for a while, and then it was announced last year that it would start resuming using straw as part of the fuel mixture with indicative levels of 40,000 tons per year expected. So you see here that different agrobiomasses are used on different scale plants. In every case, the supply chains and the local arrangements, of course, might be quite different. And then moving on, I will speak to I will say a few things about the AgrobioHeat project and its activities. AgrobioHeat is a project funded by Horizon 2020, and the main idea, as you can guess by the acronym, is to provide support to develop the use of agrobiomass heating in Europe. Effectively, the main idea behind the project is to somehow connect locally available agrobiomass resources, which you can find pretty much everywhere in rural Europe, with a local demand, the heat demand, which is still not only in the rural side but also on the whole Europe, mostly based on fossil fuel consumption. So the project is started in January 2019. It will last for 3 years. Serf is the project coordinator, and we have 6 multiplication countries in which we are doing activities to promote the concept of using agrobiomass for heating, and these are Spain, France, Croatia, Ukraine, Romania, and Greece, representing different climate conditions, different patterns of crop production, and different structure of the agricultural sector, among others. In every of these countries, we have a national multiplier organization, someone from either the renewable energy sector or the agricultural sector who is supporting us. We have 3 technical partners, Services and Bios, who are contributing on technical activities and provide technical expertise. We have Bioenergy Europe, the European Bioenergy Association. We have Food and Bio Cluster in Denmark, which represents the country's large experience in straw utilization, among others. White Research, which contributes on the social science expertise. And finally, a somewhat different partner, Bioenergy, which is a biomass heating facility operator in France, which in fact already uses agrobiomass in a couple of its facilities, and would very much like to continue doing so in its other heating plant fleet. The AgrobioHeat approach and strategy. Briefly, we work on 3 layers. The first is to develop trust and provide proof that agrobiomass heating works. The next layer is generating a vision and roadmaps, for example, for agrobiomass heating and how to put them in the political agenda or business strategies and local and regional development priorities. And the final pillar is support, providing support to specific stakeholders or key actors through targeted actions. But I won't bother you with all these details, and I will provide some concrete examples of what we have been doing in the project recently. So one very interesting thing is an EU public perception survey on agrobiomass heating. To my knowledge, the first such survey of its kind. It was designed and run online last spring. We collected more than 3,700 responses, and we asked the respondents to explain their knowledge of the concept of agrobiomass and how they see agrobiomass as fitting into their local settings. We have identified drivers and barriers. You can go into much more details in the report we have produced, but the key finding that I would like to share with you today is that what we have found is that increased awareness of agrobiomass heating as well as first-time users leads to increased acceptance. So this is essentially a snowball effect. The more agrobiomass heating is deployed, the more public acceptance we will have for it. Another thing which you can already visit is the Agrobiomass Observatory. This is a map-based tool that now includes more than 1,000 entries, and you can use it to find interesting things such as existing heating cases of agrobiomass. You can use it to find other examples of agrobiomass utilization. For example, it's used in large power plants, CHP production, biofuels, or even byproducts. You can find different equipment providers, for the moment mostly boilers and flue gas cleaning equipment. You can find specific agrobiomass fuel suppliers, either producers directly or traders, as well as many other interesting actors such as ESCOs, installers, and so on. The website is continuously updated, and a particular feature it has, which is easier to see if you visit it, is the interconnections between the different cases. So if you click on a specific equipment manufacturer, for example, you can find the specific references it has with agrobiomass heating, in particular, and existing installations in Europe. Another thing that we are doing is, or we try to do when the pandemic doesn't affect us, is our field visits. We had organized a very successful one in February 2020 in Spain, in the Villafranca case, which I mentioned before. We organized a workshop dedicated on the use of vineyard prunings for heat and energy production. We had a chance to visit the local district heating boiler. We saw how the harvesting works in practice, and we also visited a larger biomass boiler in a winery, in a local winery, which is used to provide process cooling, in fact, and partly fuel by vineyard prunings and partly by forest wood chips. And you can find further information on the project website. We are also publishing several guides and fact sheets, which you can always find on our webpage. The last one we have is the second edition of the Straw to Energy guide. The original was published in 2011. It was widely read, and this one is an updated with new information on technology updates, as well as with stronger emphasis on the bioeconomy applications of straw. Apart from that, we also have a series of fact sheets on different types of agrobiomass fuels. We have fact sheets you can find on sunflower husk pellets, olive stones, miscanthus, nutshells, prunings, straws, and soil rotation copies. And some of these fact sheets will evolve into full-fledged guides like the one on straw. We have also published some short information fact sheets on agrobiomass boilers and flue gas cleaning systems. Again, you can find everything on our website. And a little more technical activity, and something which is very much connected with the issue of the agrobiomass emissions and how they might fit into and evolve into European regulations. We have started and we are planning a series of combustion tests with different agrobiomass fuels. Our project partner Bios from Austria has already performed some, and some first results are already available. And in those tests we tested an innovative boiler concept, which is based, I would say, on fuel gasification and extreme air staging, and that is provided by the well-known manufacturer Windhager, as well as the state-of-the-art concept of the great fired furnace coupled with an ESP. We tested different agrobiomass assortments in the boilers, and we evaluated the emissions, and we saw that in both cases we have a very good gas phase burnout, so very low carbon monoxide emissions. The NOx emissions, as I mentioned, they are generally higher compared to wood fuels because of the higher fuel nitrogen content. And we found that in both cases we can achieve very low levels of dust emissions. The gasification concept can achieve those even without the filter, while for the second case we do need a filter to bring equivalent level of emissions. Several more tests are planned by the project partners at SERF in Greece and CIRSE in Spain, and all these together will be used to provide informed emission limits for agrobiomass fuels in a further revision, in a future revision of the eco-design regulation. And one more thing that I invite you all to attend and register for that is a matchmaking event with the title Bringing Value to Agrobiomass. The purpose of this activity, that is going to be held on the 10th and 11th February 2021, is to connect different partners, for example, agrobiomass producers with technology providers or fuel producers with end users and so on. You can perform different one-to-one meetings on this platform. Again, I invite you to visit this, create your profile, and start connecting with people that have the same interest in agrobiomass as you are. To sum up this presentation, some concluding remarks. I will mostly focus on agrobiomass heating. The first point I would like to make is that as I have highlighted, it is cost competitive if you look from the fuel perspective. So on the proper conditions, you can have a meaningful investment with a very short payback time. The second point is that the use of agrobiomass for heating can contribute substantially to greenhouse gas emission reduction through the substitution of fossil fuels used for heating. I would also like to point out that agrobiomass, as has been clear, comes in many different shapes and forms, so it can be used and deployed on different settings depending on the local conditions. And depending on what you have, you can find the fitting solution for your case for many different sectors and applications, whether you want to heat a greenhouse, whether you want to heat a public building, a district heating a network, or even a process industry, you can find the solution for agrobiomass. The emissions of agrobiomass can be controlled. It's easier to do that on a larger scale, but it can also be done more and more so even on a smaller scale, and most of the technical issues can be overcome as long as you properly select the technology for that. And the final point is that agrobiomass heating can be a very European thing. We have the technological excellence and we have the local fuels that can be used to deploy solutions on the local setting. And with that, I would like to close the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be open to questions as I understand.